And welcome back to the main stage. I have to say, when we first created the Business Culture Awards and set up the community, the intention was to create great conversation, to share insight, to enable learning. And just listening to the last two sessions have just been absolutely fantastic. So I just, I know I'm saying that from the position of chairing today. Just the amount of learning that's going on, the quality of the questions, the richness of what people are sharing is just absolutely fantastic. So wonderful, wonderful sessions. Thank you for getting involved. Thank you for asking questions and really being able to tap into Atif's great experience in that last session. It's just fantastic to see all of that happening. Right, shall we crack on? So, which is one of Atif's sayings. Let's indeed crack on. So let's introduce a fantastic panel. We've got a panel who are going to be discussing putting well-being and compassion at the heart of how we do business, and they're all joining me on stage now. It's like it just pop, pop, pop. It's absolutely fantastic. So welcome everyone. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves to the conference audience. So if you just explain who you are and which organisation you're joining from, that'd be fantastic. And I'm going to start with you, Stephanie. I don't think Stephanie can hear me, so I'm going to go to Ali.
Hi Tim, afternoon everybody. I'm Ali Mohammed. I'm Director of HR and OD at South East Coast Ambulance Service.
Thank you, sir. Lovely to see you. Linda.
That's you too.
Hi everyone, I'm Linda Mountford. I'm the HR Director at Thai Union. Thai Union's an ambient seafood company, and I manage a number of European seafood organisations, including John West Foods, which I think most people will be familiar with.
It's definitely in my larder.
It is. It's normally tucked away in the back of the cupboard, that John West can of tuna when you need something in an emergency.
And Stephanie, are you connecting okay?
I can hear you now. Thank you. I'm Stephanie Neuvirth, and I lead global people and organization transformation for Mars Veterinary Health, and I'm located in Vancouver, Washington.
Thank you so much for joining us. You get the prize for the signal most travelled.
Thank you.
As they say, I love it when a technological plan comes together. So it's
yes.
Fantastic to bring you all here. And from an audience point of view, what you're looking at is a group of winners, a group of leaders who have built winning approaches within their organizations, which have been recognized by the Business Culture Awards of really taking those businesses forward. So it's fantastic to get into the conversation with you all. So I'm going to kick off with the first question, and Stephanie, I'm going to start with you, please. Even before COVID-19 and obviously pandemic has caused us to focus on global health, we've been seeing well-being climb the list of organizational priorities. How has this been true for your organization?
So we began a health and well-being journey more than 5 years ago, and we believe that positive health and well-being is really a backbone or foundational for our business, which is focused on healthcare for pets. We have a 5-part strategy, which is focused on physical, mental, financial, career, and community well-being. And we believe that well-being is essential to engagement of our associates, which really has helped us with ensuring that we can attract, retain, and engage our associates. So again, very foundational to our culture and has been part of a long journey for us.
Ali, how's that true within your organization?
Yeah, I guess one of the interesting things about working in the health service is that you think it'd be obvious that as an organisation, we put a lot of effort and time and care into staff health and well-being. And I think that is generally true, but I think actually it has variable impact like it does in most organisations. Historically, you know, some staff will always feel cared for and looked after, and other staff, no matter how much you ask of them or how much you do for them, they're never quite never quite feeling it, I think. So I think for our organisation, I've been working since January actually, so it's a new venture for me going into ambulance service. I think what the organisation is trying to do is in particular deal with a lot of mental health issues. So ambulance workers and paramedics in particular, a bit like GPs and some hospital doctors, they really suffer from higher rates of burnout, PTSD and suicidal tendencies. And so it's been a massive issue, I think, in the ambulance service. And obviously we can talk a little bit more later about the impact of COVID and how that's kind of accentuated some of that even more. But it has been a massive issue, I think, for frontline staff. And one other quick comment, I think, is that, you know, in our region, which we cover Kent, Surrey and Sussex, for those who are not familiar with where we cover, we had the first case of COVID as well. And so it was a bit more, if you like, that initial panic of, oh my God, it's here, you know, like we've got to deal with this now. I think that panic amongst staff and us as managers of the organisation as well was even more heartfelt, I think. So. And
can I ask one follow-up question, which is sort of specific to you know, your sector? And we, as people around the world, will recognise this. There's been this recognition of health professionals, and you know, alongside the core functions which have held every country going, but particular recognition of health professionals, and clap for the NHS, and you know, with people standing out on their streets and actually talking to their neighbours. How has that been received within your organisation? Has there been a change in appreciation, or was it short-lived and we've all moved on?
I think without doubt, I think the whole, if I just comment on the clapping, the NHS thing, I mean, that had a massive emotional impact, I would say, not only amongst colleagues, actually. I mean, even it's interesting in our own road, you know, people know that, you know, those of us who work in the NHS, we've had to go out and go into work when other people haven't had to, in that sense, and that they've been protected at home. And so I was, you know, it's quite emotional actually when you're coming home and you see your neighbours kind of like clapping you back, which is, you know, even for someone like myself who's in management, you know, to see that happen, it was amazing. So I think it did sort of reach its time, though. I think actually that's also true to say. So, but I think was it well very much appreciated? Yes, of course it was. So.
Thank you. And Linda, how about for you? How has Wellbeing been at the centre of your organisation historically?
So I think for John West, similar to Steffi's point, really, I think it very much sits at the heart of our core values. So the business has an extremely long heritage, goes back to the 1800s, and right from the very beginning, there's been this quest for the best. And I think as an organisation, we've always recognised the importance of the health and safety of our crew. But about 4 or 5 years ago, I think we just came to the conclusion that it's no longer enough. I think we all experience sort of a world today where we never truly switch off. You know, we recognise that we're just constantly overloaded with information, which in itself creates, you know, added and continued pressure. You know, we've experienced unprecedented change, and that's even if we put the last 6 months with COVID to one side. You know, we're under, you know, increasing financial pressures, many of us. For some of us, we're taking on additional caring responsibilities, obviously, because there just isn't the social care in place. So for us, I think there was a realization that, you know, although we have a fantastic culture, it's very open, it's very collaborative, it's very safe, it's built on trust. We recognised 4 or 5 years ago it was no longer enough. And we know the stats, you know, we've seen that, you know, I think it's just over 1 in 6 people experience mental health problems in the workplace. It's even more pronounced for women who work full-time. So we took the decision, similar to Stephanie, to really sort of broaden our approach. We recognised we needed a more comprehensive wellbeing strategy. And that started just as a business, as a leadership team, just recognising these pressures. You know, they are real. No one is immune to these pressures, including ourselves as a leadership team. You know, there should be absolutely no stigma to talking about well-being in the workplace, whether that's you know, mental health, whether that's emotional health, whether that's financial well-being. So that was really sort of the decisive point for us. It sounds very altruistic, but we also believe genuinely it was the right thing to do for our crew. You know, we'd seen all the data about, you know, there's a positive correlation to engagement, to performance, it reduces absenteeism. But again, you know, we've always been driven by our values. So for us, we wanted to respond, we wanted to invest, and we wanted to do the right thing.
And did you find, Linda, that there was, you know, you picked up specifically on mental health there, but were there any particular factors that you recognised within across your organisation that you focused upon, or that were specific to your sector, or did you put in a more broad-based approach?
Yeah, it's a broad strategy, but there are multiple pillars. So for mental health, for example, we worked very closely with the Mind charity, because we're not experts by any means in this field. We also, at the time of developing this strategy, we were just about to enter into an SAP implementation, and anyone who's been through an SAP implementation know it's more than just a systems implementation. You know, it's a business transformation project. So we were particularly mindful at the start of this process that in itself would drive pressures for our team. There would absolutely be a pull on resource. So initially, when we looked at our wellbeing strategy, we absolutely focused specifically on mental health. But then over the years, we've absolutely broadened the scope and the reach of that strategy.
Thank you. I just had a SAP flashback. Which some other members of the audience might recognise. Anyway, Ali, where have you focused? Have you kept it? I mean, you know, Linda was talking about some great broad pieces there. She talked about the financial piece. She talked about mental health and other elements. Did you also have a broad base to your approach, or have you been keeping it, you know? Obviously, you're only 9 months into the role. For those who don't know, you've done various different things, but you were previously at Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children. So in your leadership roles, have you kept it tight, or have you gone broad when you've looked at implementation?
So I think I would say the current period has been about focusing our effort. So we have quite a range of actually support for staff anyway. You know, we have the usual things about employee assistance programs, sort of stress management staff, you know, occupational health. You know, people can do alternative duties for a while. All those kinds of things actually that form any part of a good wellbeing strategy. I think what the last 6 months or so in particular have shown is that the need to focus that so that staff have a single point of access into entry into those services. So from a corporate point of view, I think it's quite easy for us to say, well, we've got all these things actually, and they all make sense. But when you go and talk to frontline staff, particularly when you're as dispersed as we are across such a large geographical area, then I think it actually is quite confusing for staff on the frontline. So I think part of our work has been to focus it under one banner of a wellbeing hub. The other thing I think is that, and this has been the subject of national news, and people will be very familiar now with the initials PPE and what that means in the NHS. But I would say I think it was quite an experience. I think having got this, I mean, it's settled down now and the supply chain is there. But those early days of when the early cases were coming and we were sending our staff into people's homes, And you weren't 100% sure that you really had everybody protected all the time. And that was a pretty difficult ask, I think, and because it lasted some 6 to 8 weeks as well. So in terms of leadership effort, that really needed focus, and also a lot of engagement work to kind of keep staff's morale up during that what was a really difficult time. And the last part of this, I think, is, and it's a surprising one, this actually, again, is that I think, given that we're the industry that looks after a lot of clinical information, I think it's been interesting that actually a lot of managers found it quite difficult to have conversations with staff about their medical conditions, the kind of things that put them at risk. And I think this is a really interesting kind of learning point from the whole COVID, and obviously it's still ongoing, but I think it's a really interesting learning point about the fact that, say, for example, myself and my manager will rarely ever have a conversation about any medical conditions I've got. But actually, in the current situation, obviously being a BAME member of staff and therefore more likely to be at risk, and also with family with medical conditions, I think these are the kind of things I think actually the managers are having to have conversations about now. So that kind of skilling up of people to handle that kind of difficult conversation has been a real issue for us, I would say. So it's one of those things we're going to take forward, I think, after the COVID crisis as well.
That's fascinating. That it's not just the need, but it's the skills that are required to actually deliver upon the need, and that you've recognised that, and then sought to make that investment and to develop it. And I suppose
No, I was going to say, and even sort of basic things like where do you store that information afterwards, yes. Where you've had that record of that conversation. So on one level, a really basic issue. But on another, that kind of stuff wouldn't normally be stored in our sector, at least, in the same place as your normal, if you like, a HR file, as it were. So it's just some really interesting ethical dilemmas as well en route. So.
It's just the comment about PPE. It did remind me of my favourite cartoon on the when children went back to that place called school that they'd almost forgotten existed, and the one of the cartoonists had this child going back to school with the parent shouting out the door, "Don't forget your PPE kit." So, appeal to my warped sense of humour. Stephanie, and how for you? It's have you had a point of focus? Have you done the land and expand, or did you start broad? Did you get the feedback as to where the needs was from data or from focus groups? How did you identify where to focus your efforts?
Yes, so we started with a health and well-being survey and surveyed our associates to really try to understand where are their greatest needs. And initially what we found was that flexibility was the greatest need. And really just from a staffing and scheduling perspective, how could we better accommodate our associates? So the majority of small animal companion doctors are female. And we very much recognize that our scheduling was a big barrier for our doctors, as it relates to how they could manage and balance, their personal life. So flexibility was where we actually first started. We then moved into really recognizing that financial debt is a huge issue in the veterinary profession. So the debt to income ratio, particularly in the US, can be as much as 3-to-1 debt to income. And so we really found that was becoming a huge barrier. So the financial stress causing physical and mental, well-being challenges. And so we introduced a student debt pilot in one of our units, where really what we launched first was advice to try to help our veterinarians really understand how to better manage their debt and have a strategy around their loans. We then also introduced a partner to really help with the reduction of interest rate and to restructure debt for our doctors. And then we added a contribution that we made directly to the loans. So student debt for us has been a very unique challenge related to our industry. And then I think most recently, we've been very focused, like Linda, on the concept of mental health. And we have been quite bold about training our leaders and our associates on how to spot when your coworkers are struggling or having issues. And so we recently rolled out a program called ASK, which is really around suicide prevention training. And we've become much more bold about addressing the issues head on and really helping leaders and other associates to support their colleagues during times of high stress. So those are a few examples that are unique to our industry, but we as well have spoken more about PPE, and I know more about masks than ever dreamed I would ever want to know. So it's been a very challenging and time of growth and learning.
Yes, I think that sums up this time in so many ways. We're getting some really great feedback from the audience. They're loving the session, and I have a question for you all. This is from Jennifer Fryer. And Jennifer says, thank you, great session so far. We love a bit of affirmation, thank you so much. Are you able to share how you measure the impact of your work on the mental health and well-being of your staff? We're starting to be asked more and more for quantitative results and not just anecdotal evidence. Stephanie, you gave me a nice nod there, so I'm going to come to you first, if I may. The quantitative impact of your work.
Yeah, so I think it's quite difficult, but what I can say is that we use a third-party provider to help support us, and while the information is anonymous to us as the employer, we know how many associates have reached out. We also know that those who have taken a survey with the third-party provider, what levels of stress they have recorded with the third-party provider. So what we see is aggregate data that helps to give us some indication that the tool is helpful for our associates. But also we participate in an Gallup engagement survey, where our survey is asking health and well-being questions, and whether our organization is providing the levels of support. And so there is some numeric scoring that is coming through that measure as well.
And does the stress scoring, does it break down? So does it look at different reasons of that level of stress? So for example, financial.
Yes, it looks at different reasons, and it looks at the severity level of the person's response to the question.
That's really helpful, thank you. Ali, what can you add to that in terms of the quantitative point?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here, I think. So the first one, I think, is if we're just looking at efficiencies and cost efficiencies, then I think what we found is through organising things better, where we just reduce sort of overheads, if you like. But I think more important than that, because even though that's a big number, it's not as big as the issue of staff absence, I think, caused by mental health or other issues, and in particular it's mental health. That's why I'm focusing on that today, I think, during COVID. So we put a lot of effort into really tracking what's happening to every single member of staff. We run a 24/7 service, so I know it's kind of obvious, I suppose, when I say it, but therefore anyone missing from any shift, and if you think about the nature of an ambulance service, is the vast majority of our staff work in twos, and so if you lose one, you lose the other effectively. So you can't put one person out on an ambulance by themselves normally. So I think that's really important in that it has a double impact on us more than we're doing it in other settings. So being able to track exactly what's happening with every individual person. The other thing I'd say, I think, is that it's quite a unionised sector, the ambulance service, I think, actually, and I think it's been really interesting that working with our union colleagues, actually, they've been very supportive of this as well, I think, so that when we're getting into things like numbers and people coming back to work and those kinds of things, they're often pushing just as hard as we are, interestingly, because they want people to be back at work healthily, but they also don't want people left stranded as well. So I think tracking each individual case, and every day we have morning and night we have a meeting about everybody who's out at the moment, in terms of the people who've been affected by COVID and other sickness as well, obviously, but in particular that, so we can track where they are, when they're coming back to work, and those kinds of things, because all of those things you can count, and all of those things you can quantify in cash terms as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I've just been advised that when I'm not speaking, you can hear the bird song behind me. For anyone not in the UK, that is a blackbird singing its heart out outside my window. I might turn my mic off when I'm not speaking. So there you go. The bird appreciation group have just been in contact to identify the song. Linda, and for you.
So as well as engagement data, which obviously we can break down and look at the particular dimensions. So we work with Gallup as well, but we also participate in the Best Companies assessment, which is very good in terms of well-being. It has a specific dimension. But we work with a company in the Northwest. So they basically come into our organisation and they assess our wellbeing strategy. And they do that. Obviously, we present, information on an annual basis around numerous elements of well-being, but they also meet with a cross-section of our employees as well. So they actually interview the team to get feedback. And that's the Northwest Wellbeing Charter that obviously anybody on the session today based in the Northwest may be aware of that organisation. But that's really helpful for us because we're bringing the outside in, so we're able to calibrate in terms of what other organisations are doing, but it gives us a really helpful scorecard as well, so we can see where we're really excelling, where we're best in class, but where, for example, we've got more to do. So that could be around developing an alcohol awareness strategy, looking at how we support smokers at work more comprehensively. So that's a really good data point for us. And then we also provide all our crew with annual medicals. And I just want to emphasize it's absolutely anonymized data, so we don't get personal data, but we do get reports from the organization that we work with. And again, it gives us an indication in terms of stress levels, in terms of happiness factors across the organisation. And again, we're able to track that on an annual basis. And also it helps us then pick up if there are any patterns, there are any trends. Are we seeing pressure points within a particular department, with a particular manager? And again, this is about how we support. It's, not to beat people with a stick. It's absolutely about how we train and support our managers if they do need additional assistance in this area. The other thing that we do, which again, is probably, well, it isn't quantitative, but we've structured so that our wellbeing strategy, it's not designed to be a HR strategy, it's a business strategy. So we've structured to empower our crew in this space. So we, for example, have a team of mental health champions who've been trained by the charity Mind that I mentioned earlier. So again, those guys are really on the ground. They can really identify if we need any early interventions. They can give feedback. We've got mental health first aiders. We've also got a health and safety committee. So we've got a number of people on the ground that we've invested in and developed so they can also give feedback. I know that's not quantitative, and I know we're always challenged as HR professionals to give quantitative data, but I do think the richness of those discussions, the richness of getting feedback from your crew, to me, is invaluable, and we do really sort of appreciate and focus on that as well as an organisation.
And it translates into the quantitative, doesn't it? Because it's the number of areas that are identified within a health and safety committee meeting, for example, the timeline under which they are delivered upon, it shows that we are a reflective and responsive organisation, rather than, we've all seen examples where the same asks are coming round and round again. Whereas if those pieces, if those layers of communication with an organisation are working, then you can demonstrate the responsiveness. In a previous session, the point was made in terms of regulators, and I think it's so important when we're having these conversations that we can actually just show our workings. This is how we're working at all levels of the organisation, and then seeking to build.
Yeah, I'd completely agree, and they're fantastic as well at holding us accountable. If we're not doing enough, then we need to refocus on other priorities. Again, we can get that immediate feedback. We're not waiting for an annual survey or for monthly metrics to come through. So again, it sort of enables us to be very agile in this space as well.
And Linda, in terms of the future, what do you see as the areas that you and your team will be focusing on within Wellbeing? Obviously, we're in a very particular point in time at the moment, but in terms of, as you look at the months ahead, where do you see your work progressing?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of our work over these last 6 months has been focused on COVID, and we're just managing a phased return to office. But for the next 12 months for us, we're absolutely looking to focus and invest more in our flexible benefits. So we know that whilst the food industry's probably fared well throughout COVID, better than a lot of other industries, we know that many of our crew family members, have been impacted. They may have been furloughed. They've lost their job. They've lost an income. So we're looking at our flexible benefits just to make sure that we're offering the right range of benefits to our crew, given the change in the circumstances that we've seen over this last 6 months. And again, we're going out and we're getting feedback in terms of what that should look like. We're also investing in a flex pot as well. So again, we're not asking our crew to obviously have to dig deeper in their pockets for this flexibility. The other area I touched on before, we've done some work in this space, but for us, financial well-being, it's a real priority for us. So, we're looking at the whole piece around financial education. We're looking at how we can link with the appropriate advisors to obviously give financial advice, because obviously we're not qualified or registered to do that. So for us, that's absolutely a key focus. We know it's going to get, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better from an economic perspective, and then there's also the potential of a second wave around the corner and having to go back into full lockdown. So that for us is a key focus.
And Ali, for you, when you look at the months ahead, what do you see that will be the same and what will be different?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty tough winter, if you ask me, for the health sector. I think firstly, it's going to be winter, which is always the toughest time of year anyway. I think so. There's additional pressures there, and I think the second thing is that I don't think we've seen the complete kickback from the first wave yet. So I think there's going to be some. I touched on PTSD and things like that earlier, but we've also picked up issues a bit like Linda was saying around financial hardship, but also I think issues where people have had very difficult home circumstances and things around. So we've tried to put in confidential sort of processes for domestic abuse and things like this. So I think there are a number of things which haven't fully come out yet, I think, but actually as we carry on for a prolonged period. And the final one, I think, is just around burnout. I think not just around frontline staff, but actually in the management ranks as well. I think, to be working like this on a sustained period, particularly when, many people are working remotely. And we've even sort of tried agile working with some of our call centre staff in terms of replying to 111 calls and 999 calls. So 111 calls are kind of roughly running at 50% increase from a week ago. So that's already going up hugely. So you can imagine how that's going to be another week or two. 999 calls normally have to be answered in 1 second. So that's the kind of like pressure the staff are under in terms of like doing things. So I think all of that has a cumulative toll as well when you're looking at that in the context of sort of winter and COVID. And we also happen to be the trust closest to the continent as well. So there's some special things that we do, we are preparing for around Brexit as well, around border controls and things. So there's quite a lot of pressure, I think, coming up in the system. So yeah, pretty full agenda, I would say.
Thank you. That's incredibly insightful. Frames a lot of our thinking. It's this sort of cliche about is it a sprint or is it a marathon? It feels like it's a marathon of sprints. You just work something out, deal with it, and then you want the next thing and the next thing, and the demands just don't stop coming. And I think everything that you're talking about, and all three of you are talking about in terms of mental health and resilience, and supporting people through a quite exceptional time, it's inspirational. It really is. Stephanie, and for you.
So our focus is right now on childcare and parental benefits, very much related to COVID. Very challenging time with children at home and schooling, remote schooling. So I think that's the most immediate concern and need that is being discussed. We are also quite challenged with social unrest at this point. So a very big focus on inclusion, diversity, equity, and belonging. And we really bundle that up under the topic of community and well-being from a community perspective. We also continue to see just the resilience, as Ali and Linda have spoken about. As this goes on, we too believe that there's a wave 2 and a potential wave 3, and the need for resilience to continue to sustain and manage through as a essential service. So how do we continue to help provide support from a mental health perspective, flexibility, agility, wherever needed to really manage?
I've just got to say thank you so much, because those insights and the way you've all just gone to the heart of this is, these are the needs, this is how we've gathered the data, this is how we're responding, and this is what we see the future months bringing. It's just been fantastic. It's been a really rich session, and just marvellous to hear from you all. So thank you ever so much. And as with all our speakers, I just want you to imagine the ringing endorsement of people banging the floor and clapping their hands in appreciation of your time. Thank you ever so much, all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks.
Thank you.